Hey, what's up, y'all? Matt M. Mix is on the mic, and today, or at least the day I plan to upload this video, is opening night. So we are going to talk about some of the best matchups over the next 3 days that will take over, the first few games of the season. So the first one I'll talk about is the first matchup. The defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder will receive their rings tonight versus the Houston Rockets, and the Rockets, of course, now employ former Thunder superstar Kevin Durant, who was unable to win a ring in OKC, but Shea has. And, of course, he's the defending MVP. A lot of pressure on him. So we'll see how, he handles it. It's the first season where, he's on the top. Now everyone's gunning for him. And, of course, the Rockets last season, they surprised everyone by, making not only just making the playoffs. I think some people had them there, but, that high of a seed, that was just out of nowhere. And, to their credit, they weren't just complacent and be like, okay, we proved we can do it. Let's just keep the same roster. A lot of teams tend to do that. But the Rockets, they went for Kevin Durant, which was a big move. So the next matchup is also today. One of the two matchups today is between the Golden State Warriors and Los Angeles Lakers. So this is a matchup we've seen very often throughout the recent years. And, of course, this matchup isn't as good as, they were planning because LeBron will not be playing today. He's scheduled to come back probably around Halloween, so only about a week or so, maybe a little later. So, yeah, the Warriors, they're coming in, they should be able to win this matchup. They got a fully healthy roster. And, they're feeling good about themselves. But at the end of the day, the Los Angeles Lakers, if you forgot, they somehow, they employ Luka Doncic. So, you can never quite count Luka Doncic out. So we'll see how this matchup goes. But I think the Warriors should be able to win it. And, last season, after trading for Butler, they were red hot. So let's see, it would be good for them if they can, keep that up. So this is a matchup that's going to be happening tomorrow. Arguably the most notable matchup tomorrow. It's between the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Of course, it's the playoff series. A couple of years ago, the Knicks advanced to the second round, upsetting the Cavs. They were kind of destined to face each other last playoffs, but it didn't quite happen. The Cavs just completely collapsed versus the Pacers. And now we get this matchup opening night, 2025. And I think the Knicks, they are a team that are facing, a lot of pressure because they should be able to make the finals this season. The Pacers were the only thing standing in their way, and they don't have Halliburton for the rest of the season. So I think when you look at this Knicks roster, 1 to 9, or, 1 to 10, however big their rotation is, it's the best roster in the East. But the Cavs, they did get the first seed for a reason. They had a lot of factors that caused them to collapse in the playoffs. So this was actually an opening night matchup last season. It's between the Orlando Magic and Miami Heat. So a lot has changed especially for the Heat during the last season. Of course, in this opening night matchup last season, they had Jimmy Butler. They no longer employ Jimmy Butler. He's on the Golden State Warriors. So I think kind of the tides have shifted in this matchup. Last season, the Heat were seen as the better team. And now this season, I think the Magic are really expected to lap them. And a lot of teams are expected to lap the Heat. And the Magic, they have some expectations to, take a step up after last season, which some would find is disappointing. The Magic, they play really good defense. But I think they are still a piece away on offense to truly be one of the top dogs in the East. It's just a lot better offenses in the East. They'll be able to get some stops, but I just don't know if they can score enough for that to matter. Of course, the Heat, they still have, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, so they won't be a terrible roster, but still not good enough. So this matchup is interesting. So it's the Atlanta Hawks taking on the Toronto Raptors. I personally don't find this matchup too intriguing, but some people might, so I decided to cover it. So the Hawks, they made some big moves this offseason. They now have Kristaps Porzingis. They're, really trying to build around Trae Young while they still have him. We'll see how that ultimately goes. And the Raptors, they are, starting the season now with Brandon Ingram. They traded for him in last deadline. He didn't get to play much. So now they're trying to, both teams trying to capitalize on moves. But I'm not really sure how much either of those moves really, change the needle for this team. I think ultimately both these teams are around the same that they were last year. But I think either could, prove me wrong. We'll see. I think the Hawks probably have more potential. And I think they are definitely just the better roster generally in this matchup. So this is a matchup that happens very often. The Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers. Really, since Jason Tatum entered this roster, the Celtics have absolutely dominated this matchup. But remember, no Tatum this year due to his torn Achilles. So now Jaylen Brown, he will have to take over. And this is his season. He has a chance to prove that he is among the top 15 players in the league. Of course, he's got a Finals MVP in his bag, but it's very good. That's one of the greatest things you can win. But ultimately, he's got to prove himself. And the Sixers, they had a very down year last season due to a lot of injuries, but ultimately they have Embiid back. They have Maxey back. They got some good young pieces like VJ Edgecombe, who they drafted. Last season they had Jared McCain, although I think he's going to be missing some time early on. They have the talent. It's just a matter of keeping them on the court and keeping them together. That's really the important part, making sure they get the reps together. But if they do, they'll be great. So the Dallas Mavericks will be taking on the San Antonio Spurs. So the Mavericks, they're a bit of an awkward roster right now. Of course, they traded Luka Doncic away at the trade deadline for Anthony Davis. So now they kind of have a dynamic duo of Anthony Davis and Cooper Flag. Kyrie Irving, of course, is going to be missing a lot of time. And I think, considering his age, he might miss more time than otherwise expected for, I think the ACL normally does take a lot of time anyway, but they'll have to take even longer because you just cannot risk it at his age. And of course, the San Antonio Spurs, they get to really debut that De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama duo. And I think that's going to be an absolutely dominant duo. Wemby, they'll have to go easy on him because of the blood clots. But if he can even get 60 games, the Spurs are going to be absolutely great. And they just have all the pieces needed to be a playoff team. And heck, they might even, compete for the title this year. We'll, see just how well all these pieces end up meshing. So the Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the Portland Trail Blazers. So the Timberwolves, they're a roster that have, one of the best players in the league in Anthony Edwards, but they have just not done a good job of building around him, particularly in recent years. I mean, they've made the Western Conference Finals great, but, this roster clearly is still lacking. And, it's the West, so you can't get away with these kind of problems that you could maybe in the East. So, but, the Timberwolves are still, I think, a better roster than the Portland Trail Blazers. And the Trail Blazers, they're kind of an interesting team. They're largely banking on Damian Lillard, but, he's out for the season, torn Achilles. So, this might just end up being a mid-season for the Blazers. We'll see. But, they do have some potential long-term. They've got some good young pieces like Denny and Shaedon Sharpe. But yeah, for now, I definitely think the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're just a better basketball team. And they should be able to win this opening day match. So this is a matchup that's going to be happening on Thursday. So the Pacers, they have to wait 2 days to start their season. And they'll be having a finals rematch with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, the Thunder won the series anyway. And the Pacers, they are without Tyrese Haliburton for the entire season due to his torn Achilles. So it makes this matchup even easier for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But of course, the Pacers, they always fight hard. This is not, a game you can take for granted. The Pacers could just sneak in, steal a game on you, try and build some momentum. The Pacers, they're still a solid roster. They're not going to be, tanking or be terrible. But, ultimately, they can only go so far without Tyrese Haliburton. They're going to probably lose a lot of close games that they would have won with Tyrese Haliburton. So, we'll see what this team's ready to do. But for now, I definitely think they're just like a play-in team. Thunder, they will be expected to defend their title. So the final matchup that I'll be covering is another Thursday matchup. The Denver Nuggets also have to wait until Thursday to play their first game of the season. They will be taking on the Golden State Warriors. Of course, the Warriors, they have that opening night matchup versus the Lakers, but the Nuggets, they have to wait. And the Nuggets, they made some very good moves this offseason. They got Cam Johnson. They got Bruce Brown back. They've got a good roster going, but ultimately I do question the Nuggets' ability to beat, certain contenders. I think the roster is better than last season, but I think they still have the same core issues that will make them struggle versus contenders. But, the Warriors, I think they're a team that's probably going to come out guns blazing because, we saw what they were doing with Jimmy Butler before, all the injuries. They were looking basically unstoppable. And, they were able to beat the Rockets even with Jimmy Butler missing a game.